I am the Chief Operating Officer of First Nations Oista Corporation, and we work with and are privileged to support the native CDFI industry, community development financial institutions. We provide loan capital and training and technical assistance. And I think one of the things we'll see, we're going to see a lot of the innovations that are happening throughout Indian country as we talk through this panel. But one of those innovations is the native CDFIs and their model of tribal sovereignty support through lending and capital access. So we are going to have a native CDFI on the panel, as well as getting to hear from a variety of different perspectives, such as the Tribal Housing Authority perspective, and get to see what some of that great grassroots effort that's happening. I would say I started as a practitioner, and I think that this is one of the most exciting times to be a grassroots practitioner working at the local levels in your tribal community. We have engaged federal partners that are innovating, and like the USDA and some of and really open to conversations around that innovation. We also have Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae re-engaging in conversation around what can be done in home ownership in Indian country. And we also are really lucky and excited to have many other kinds of partners engaging with us. This includes, I'm really excited to announce today on behalf of First Nations Oista and Wells Fargo that we are launching a down payment assistance program that Wells Fargo has committed $500,000 just this year in down payment assistance money for Native American families, specifically doing that directly through Native CDFIs. So there'll be 5 Native CDFIs that have been selected that are doing mortgage lending, and this down payment assistance grants will be the missing piece, really, in helping them promote home ownership in their communities and making the loan to value and those sorts of things work in a way that hasn't worked before in their communities. So we're very excited to announce that. We've gone live. Yes, exactly. We're very excited for our partners there. And all that information is gone live now with Oista and Wells Fargo. So if you have any interest in reading more about that program, check that out. That's exciting. So I just think it's a really great time to be a grassroots practitioner. Not only are all these different stars aligning in this place, but I think the capacity of Native CDFIs, tribal governments, tribal housing authorities, is at just an unprecedented level. These organizations are doing amazing things on behalf of their communities, and I'm so excited that we're going to get to hear from them. And with that, I will introduce our esteemed panelists who are awesome. So over here is Tani Brunch. She is the executive director of the Lakota Funds, which is on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. She's also one of the great leaders of the South Dakota Housing Coalition. So we'll get to hear from the perspective of the coalition, as well as the work that they're doing on Pine Ridge. We also have someone who needs no introduction, but Bob Gochi with the United Native American Housing Association. And last but never least, Sharon Vogel with the Cheyenne River Housing Authority. So we're going to get a chance to hear about all the great work that's happening on the grassroots level, and you guys can learn about what some of the great impact that's happening at the local level from that.
I'll do it however you want. Email you
Okay. So with that, I would like everyone to get a chance to get better oriented with your work. So if we'll just start down the line here with Tani, but if you want to just take a couple minutes and describe some of the work that you're doing around housing and home lending in your community, that would be great.
Lakota Funds, has been Native CDFI serving the Pine Ridge Reservation for 32 years. But we are new to home ownership, honestly, and it has been a very rewarding journey for me personally. Lakota Funds has always provided our tribal members with access to business loan capital. We support them with technical assistance in helping them, follow their dreams and start businesses and create employment opportunities. But here in 1998, 1999, the leadership at Lakota Funds, who shall remain unnamed, decided that we also needed to do something about the lack of housing on Pine Ridge. And so at that time, 30 units of LIHTC housing was built near Wambalee. And that's 30 units of LIHTC, which was released from the restrictions in 2015. And so it's really more about Lakota Funds wanted to be done with housing because being a landlord for low-income rental units is not fun. But along the way, we have really, dove into the home ownership and really, I think, firsthand understood the benefits and the challenges to providing our Native families with that home ownership opportunity. And so it's kind of simultaneously then, and probably not by accident, more by design, under Elsie Meek's leadership. Elsie is still on my board, and also was one of the lead, part of the lead motivation behind the South Dakota Native Home Ownership Coalition. And so the coalition started up in 2014, about the same time that Lakota Funds had these units that were going to become available for home ownership. And so we've had great success. I'm so happy to be a part of that process, preparing those families for home ownership, helping them, first of all, understand ownership, period. Really get their heads around that and almost talk them into it. How owning their own home, owning something was a good thing, not only for themselves. Really the way you have to do it is to frame it around what's good for their family and future generations. And so it's been very rewarding that way. I'm happy to report that with the relationships that Lakota Funds has both with Lakota Federal Credit Union to provide that consumer loan part and also the access to savings. And with our strong relationship with Mazaska, who is the Native CDFI providing home mortgage loans on Pine Ridge, that we have actually on Thursday we'll be selling our third home. So our third Native family will achieve home ownership, but we have two more. If we had a little bit longer construction season, we'd get 3 more done this year, and I'm still hopeful that will happen. And so the cool part is that the coalition has kind of connected me then also with not only the tools for my staff to become better prepared in offering those home mortgage products and the training that's necessary to go along with that, to prepare our families for that, both with the homebuyer education and the post-purchase foreclosure prevention. All of those pieces are important up front. But it's also connected us with the relationships with Federal Home Loan Bank specifically and others, Enterprise, who have supported us along the way. The Federal Home Loan Bank offers an AHP grant, which is making these homes affordable. The homes are priced at $15,000, $20,000, and $25,000, which may sound like very affordable for everybody in the room. The truth is, without the AHP $15,000 subsidy, they would be unaffordable for most of my tenants out there. That's the low income levels that we're dealing with. But these, they've been the tenants have been always good paying, perfect paying tenants. And so we knew that if we could create a mortgage, if we could find a way to get them into a mortgage loan that had a payment the same size as their rent, it's a win for everybody. So I think that was more than what you wanted to hear from me, but it's a good start.
Great, thank you. Bob?
Well, thank you, and this has been a great couple of days, and as Jason mentioned this morning, we do have a tendency, because the group that is working on this very important issue of native home ownership and bringing capital Indian country changes a little bit every year. But there are, quite a few people, when I look around the room, that have been there for 25, 30 years. And so some of us have seen some ground replowed. It doesn't mean that it's not critical and it has to be in context. So I'm just tickled that I'm still a little bit relevant. I'm getting very, very close to my expiration date. And my role really in Indian housing has changed substantially from being, involved in a lot of, I was a housing director and served with the Federal Home Loan Bank and CDFI board and a lot of different things in past years. Now it's a much reduced presence, and I have both Sharon and Jason as officers of Unihaw, and they in fact hire me. As part of my retirement, my wife and I administer the 32 tribe United Native American Housing Association, which is 32 tribes in 7 states, a lot of which include the large land-based tribes that have high levels of poverty, not very much access to capital, and need all of your help. I mean, really, that's the focus of what we do. But of course, Unihaw is more than just home ownership, but I believe, and I've learned through my years of experience, that home ownership begins with effective rental management. And we're still learning how to do that. I mean, when you have the level of families in crisis and poverty and despair, it's a formidable challenge to be able to transition people from the mindset of day-to-day survival and the challenges of life and overcrowding and, it's a lot of times violence and, just issues that they have to deal with, to think about home ownership. I mean, that's a huge leap. And so we understand that. So one of the things that I'm really dedicated to and grateful for, and we've had, Jason and Sharon, I mean, you gotta go along with that too, but we understand it all begins with just a discussion. And under self-determination, what I like to see, and the opportunity I have to do training through the National American Indian Housing Council, is I like to encourage tribes to have a conversation. So they start the conversation of what their vision is and how the resources that we might be able to expose them to can help them with their individual vision. And it begins almost always with financial literacy. We've heard it talked about over the last several days. A lot of our children and a lot of us were not raised with financial literacy. There were no banks. A lot of our parents didn't have checking accounts and credit cards. I mean, credit cards are a relatively new thing. I mean, I remember Unihaw years ago sponsored a basketball tournament, which is still going on every year, but one year we had a team from one of the tribes in our region. They had 2 carloads of boys. That time the girls were included. Now we have 100 teams and the girls are about half, but those 2 carloads showed up. The first car got there in a terrible storm. We used to have the tournament in March. The second car, it ran off the road. The second car had the cash for the hotel. So the kids in the first car had to sit in the lobby for 12 hours. We didn't know because nobody had a credit card. Nobody had a credit card. So we talk about it, we kind of take it for granted, but there is, we are in an opportunity to educate and learn and start introducing concepts that a lot of us take for granted. As I mentioned yesterday, one of the biggest things we have to overcome when we're dealing with trust land and borrowing with a lot of the tribes that we work with, a lot of assumptions are made on the outside that aren't true, that they're different. I mean, you assumptions about, hey, why don't you just go down and get a checking account? Why don't you just go down and cash a check to the grocery store? A lot of those things just aren't possible. So we're dealing with all that. So I think universally we all agree that it all begins with the value of home ownership and beginning with financial literacy, understanding, and patience. Let's be patient. Now we're starting to see tribes incorporate financial literacy as part of their rental management. In other words, if they have a family that's behind in the rent or maybe close to eviction, one of the conditions to stay is they have to take a credit counseling class or some sort of financial literacy class. So they're starting to understand more and not be so quick just to say, the HUD rules, pay or get out. Now it's okay, what's going on? Because we know it's more complex than that. The thing that I really feel is critical about moving towards homeownership, we understand that homeownership isn't for everybody, particularly in Indian country. However, I tell tribes with a big demand, if you don't introduce affordable homeownership, you have a very small chance of meeting the housing needs of your tribe. You cannot address a waiting list with grant money. You just can't do it. And so, and I think there's a misconception that home ownership is only for higher income families. And I think your example, Tanya, is a good one. Home ownership should be available to anybody that's willing to pay whatever it is they pay. It may be a very small amount, but to take care of a home and accept the responsibilities of home ownership, that should be a right of every American. And I think that when we understand the resources, there's ways we can make it happen for very low income families. You know, we talk about $200,000 mortgages, $300,000 mortgages. That's not necessarily our reality, you know. So, and I guess the last thing is, I've been kind of beating this drum, that tribal involvement as a conversation will affect the rent schedules. We have to have sustainable programs. And so when Nahasda became the law of the land and tribes were given the authority to operate their housing programs, one of the things we lost is HUD oversight of our budgets. Now, it's a self-determined program, but a lot of our boards are hired and they don't understand that one of their responsibilities is to approve a budget and make sure they know their operating costs. You know, so if they operate a farm, or if they operate a hotel or a casino, they know there's operating costs, there's revenue, and there's expenses. Housing's really no different. And if they don't charge a rent that's affordable under the law to every single person they serve, they won't be sustainable. What's happened since Nahasda's passed is the percentage of rents as a percentage of operating costs, it used to be 46% when Nahasda was passed. What we see now is getting to be a smaller percentage and the costs are going up. Tribes are charging less rent and costs are going up. As a rule, that's the wrong direction to go if we want to encourage home ownership. So those are the things that we kind of weigh at, you know, in addition to setting meetings and making sure we have speakers and, you know, so forth. Those are the things that we talk about as well with the membership. You know, we also do the routine things. You know, we had a meth conference last year. You know, Sharon's been, and the other officers pushing us. Housing is changing. We have to learn to be property managers. We have to understand real estate concepts. All of those things are going to be vested in the tribes until we see the market meet it. You know, and it won't come to reservations yet. So we have to do it representing tribes, I think. So.
Great, thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Sharon?
Well, I guess I came into housing in just when you're asked by someone you respect and they ask you to do something in a good way, you really want to honor that person and try your best. So Mr. Wayne Duchesneau was our executive director, and I would say 22 years ago asked me to come home to Cheyenne River and start the homeownership program there. Or he called it one-stop shopping mortgage center, I think is the way that he put it. So so he asked me to do that, and then he said, and then make sure we have a credit union. You set up a credit union so that this credit union can finance these houses. And so he basically told me, this is what needs to happen, and you need to make it happen. And so I came home real naive and said, okay, we'll work together and we'll get this done. And Mr. Duchesneau then passed, and I became the executive director. But one of the things that happened through this journey is really understanding how to prepare for homeownership. Prepare from a lot of different ways. And it starts, you know, like the book says, you know, tribal government really has to prioritize this. I mean, they have to put it on the radar. They need to adopt legislation, ordinances, resolutions, and policies, you know, that set the way. land assignments, that has to be real clear as to conveyances and leases, covenances on a tribal land assignment. And there's the ongoing advocacy from a tribal government perspective that, if their advocacy is needed to promote homeownership at all different levels. And without that leadership, then it makes it really difficult. And so at Shine River, we're real fortunate that that advocacy is ongoing. They respect the work that we do as their TDAG, and they don't make it difficult for us. And for that, I'm very appreciative, and my staff is very appreciative. And then the other role that they have, and this is where it takes a lot more discipline and a lot more purpose, and that is really to have a stable workforce so that you have homeowners that can, individuals that can go into mortgage lending with confidence that they don't have to worry about a political upheaval of their jobs. And so preparing for homeownership really starts at that level, and they play an important role. And then the next preparation part that has to happen is from the TDAG or other housing entity that you have in your communities or on your reservation. And so that really looks like, what that involves a lot. It's really important work. It's homebuyer readiness program services, getting your homebuyers ready. And then that's also leads into the leadership at the TDAG really needs to have housing development projects that include rental and homeownership opportunities. And that's always really challenging. I think you need to look at it from that perspective of what does the TDAG do. It was kind of interesting when we went to fill out our first application for South Dakota Housing Development Authority, and we were applying at that year we put in 3 projects: a tax credit project, a home project, and then we were going after the National Housing Trust funds that were allocated. And so when we went to fill out the application, my development team and I, we found out that we were the developer, we were the owner, we were the general contractor. It was just like, okay, I don't think they're gonna believe this, but this is really what we are, And so that's the reality that a lot lenders and investors have to understand when you work, is the TDAGs do fulfill all those roles, and you can do it very well. If you have the capacity, you can do it very well. So as you look at those development projects, it's really requires some master planning to make sure that you and your board of commissioners, you and your tribal leaders are really moving in the right direction. You have to understand where you're going, and you have to also accept the fact that not all your applications and not all your projects are going to get funded the first time. And that isn't a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that you have something to learn to make that project better so that you can get it funded the next year or the following year. So it's an ongoing process, the journey to homeownership from a TDAG perspective. And then you really have to be that advocate. You have to be that voice, and you have to, always make sure that you're working with your tribal leadership to keep them aware and keep them in the loop as to what's going on. And then you also have to be able to work. You have to work with your homeowners to get them, ready. And the last piece of that, preparing for homeownership, is really the individual level, that family level. Is the focus really needs to be on helping them navigate. A lot of them are first generation homebuyers, and so this is overwhelming for them, and it's new language to them. Anyone that's gone through the mortgage lending process themselves understands how daunting that can be. And so imagine if you're a family member out there that is just facing this, and if you had to face it alone, a lot of them would give up. And so we make sure that they don't have to face this alone. And so having those homebuyer readiness services, having that loan packaging, all of that is being with them every step of the way to celebrate their success at the end. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So Tanya, I wanted to ask you, what do you see as some of the best practices around home ownership that you have seen either through the coalition or from your work with Lakota Funds?
And I think that's perfect. I mean, it's just a kind of a, total agreement with Sharon. It is all about the individual relationship again, and Lakota Funds already had, as a Native CDFI, I think we know that relationship is probably the strongest thing we have going for us. It's going to require a lot of time spent with that family, and you walk them through it's almost, at first when you look at the list of classes that we require or whatever, it looks daunting, and the homeowner's going, oh, you're kidding, I don't even want to do that much. But it's by design, because that's going to force them to spend enough time with you that they're going to find, that they're going to form that good, strong relationship. So we start them out with just basic financial literacy. Depending on a credit score, we might require money in motion or a credit when credit is due, and we're certified to teach all of those things. And then we go in with the home buyer education. And then we do it kind of backwards. Lakota Funds decided, just because of our experience in knowing the kind of issues that our tenants deal with in maintenance, on our rental units, what happens when the furnace stops working or the water's leaking and a million other things. We decided to go ahead and require post-purchase in advance. And so we're teaching homebuyer education and then post-purchase. And it's not even necessarily a whole separate course. We kind of have our own that we just work into the homebuyer education curriculum that we use. And so, but all of that may be, time consuming. And it, we'll really, I've got Angela out there teaching classes 2 nights a week or a weekend or whatever. We try to make it as easy to stick with as possible. But it's by design. And so at that time, then we've formed a good, strong relationship with that individual. And I think that is key, because the mortgage process is complicated, even for me as a pretty seasoned lender. To understand some of those terms and stuff, it takes a lot of repetition. It takes them, showing them the documents. And it helps a lot now that we have some of the tenants who the neighbors who have been through the process. And so they can sometimes come in and say, well, yes, you know what I mean? This was hard to understand, but this is what it means. The fact that someone right across the street did it and understood it makes it, I think a little bit less daunting for the next individual to do it too.
Great, thanks. Anything to add, Bob or Sharon?
Response to that question.
Yes, do you have anything to add around best practices
Yes.
or recommendations?
One of the things that I learned early was your success is going to be depending on your partners. And I was lucky because 2 things happened. One of the first people I met when we started to diversify, Steve Barbier. And he was such a gracious, kind, thoughtful person, and he understood Indian country better than a lot of practitioners in Indian country, and I was so impressed by that. And his grace and his intelligence and his manner of doing things led us to other NeighborWorks folks, who led us to the Montana Housing Coalition, not Native, but the Housing Coalition, which NeighborWorks sponsored, NeighborWorks Montana, Sheila Rice, and that group. That relationship, I think, can take a lot of credit for the homeownership success at Salish. And I mean, each week when I pick up our tribal newspaper, it says homebuyer education classes a week from Wednesday at this time, every week. Below it is homebuyer maintenance classes. Jason and his staff have taken what was initiated and the thoughts given us to a whole different level. They've had our members at Flathead, we have 5,000 members that live at Flathead. He's provided first-time our homebuyer training to over 2,000 people. So that shows the commitment. That speaks to why I think our numbers are so high. So good partners goes without saying. The other thing, that NeighborWorks has money. Then I found out there's an organization called Enterprise Social Investment Foundation. They bought our tax credits, our very first tax credit project that is now graduated. It was a rent-to-own project. And we are currently, Unaha has currently received a grant from them to help bring this message to at least 10 of our tribes. I mean, this hands-on assistance to them. So we're really excited about that. They're another fabulous partner. And there are others out there, Pure Tribes, other tribes that are doing it. I call one of them and find out how helpful they are. It's amazing. You hear a great idea, tribes are anxious to help each other. And I think the South Dakota Coalition is a good example of that. So I say there are so many resources we're not even finding out about. But the way you find out about them is networking, asking the successful folks. And so best practices, I think, go to the people who are pros and make it work in Indian country. And I think that's been a huge lesson. I'll close on one point on that. I was working up at White Mountain. We heard a lot of talk about their homeownership program. Victor's quoted in the book. He's a very interesting guy. I was up there doing some training with him, and all of a sudden, his FSS, Family Self-Sufficiency Officer, raised her hand, and she said, we were talking about a lot of us are doing with methamphetamine. A lot of the reservations in Montana have a problem there. And she said, I was reading something. Environmental Protection Month invites, applications for grant funds. I applied and got $800,000 for meth remediation. Like, what? Whoever thought it, you don't think of EPA when you're thinking tribal housing, right? So partnering, working with associations. We have one of the things our association has done is through the leadership of our officers. We have a website, so we have all of our forms on the website, all the links on the website. When we get notices about training, they're on the website. The Hearth Act in Word is on our website. And so, so we tell people and tell our members, collaborate, call people, call folks that have been there. And I bet Sharon gets calls a lot about, hey, how do you do this, or what do you do with this case? So that's best practice in my opinion.
Well, I was trying to figure out which best practice, because there's so many good strategies out there now and programs. So I'm going to lead off my sharing with you is to really say invest in yourself. When we got started with creating the homebuyer readiness services, it was just one person. It was me, and I had to go to classes. I had to go to training. I just really I was a sponge. I just okay, I'm asked to do something I absolutely don't know anything about. And we only bought one house in our life, and so I don't know. That was a pretty easy process, I thought, because it wasn't. It was assuming a loan of an FMHA loan, so I'm that really wasn't so bad. But now all of this other stuff. So really invest in yourself and your knowledge and the knowledge of your staff. Bring your staff along with you, because if you don't have the capacity and you don't have the right people that want to do this, it makes it really hard. It kind of has to be a shared vision. So by investing in yourself, I really mean, making sure that, if you're leading a group of people to do this in your, at your TDHE or whatever, they're gonna come to you for the answers if they don't understand what's going on. And so making sure that you're able to guide them and direct them is very important. The other is, don't expect it all to happen at one time. It's just not going to happen at one time. I mean, we started off, and all I did was just package loans. I mean, we didn't talk about any homebuyer education because I was like, I don't know how we're going to do that right now, because they were lined up at the door wanting to find out what this 184 loan product was about. They were, that was the first one that we really worked with. So. But now I can tell you where we are today. Today we provide homebuyer classes. Our classes are 12-week course. It's held every Wednesday night, and then, but it's not just taught by my staff, I teach one class, but we rely on the experts in the field. They come, and Jewel has been to Cheyenne River for the last 4 classes, and he comes up and he spends an evening with our participants, and they get to ask their questions, they get to understand, you know, what's going on. We have our land director there, and he answers their questions about how to apply for a home site. So homebuyer classes, you know, are crucial, and design your own curriculum that you're most comfortable with. You know, nobody has what we have, but we needed that to stretch that out because there was so much information to share. And the other is be prepared to help people repair their credit. I mean, when we started out, I was just really discouraged because there weren't many that were credit ready. But that was an era when there was a lot of predatory lending, and so we had to clean up that. And so now, through the work of the Native CDFIs, and they have done a great job of making sure that families understand predatory lending, and we don't see that as much as a big problem as we did back then, but we still have people that have to repair their credit. Loan packaging, that is crucial. You know, it is just, I can't overstate how important that is to helping a family apply for a loan, no matter what loan product. Kimberly is our homebuyer counselor, and she's closed loan on all the products that are out there, the Native Veterans loan, the USDA loan, the 184 loan. We've done credit union loans. I mean, you know, your staff really has to understand that. And then down payment and closing costs, we provide that. We provide a small grant to help them do that. But we also left the door open there that if they needed to install a utility line, and that was the only thing that was keeping them from getting that loan, our funds could, we can have a creative use of those funds. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's really important from a TDHE perspective is a residential home inspection. We use our staff to do inspections because it's still buyer beware. You know, of somebody, young mother that's getting into buying a used mobile home, because they can use our money for a used mobile home. They need that expert eye to go in because they don't know what they're looking for. And so you've got qualified staff that can provide that service, and it's very much needed and very much appreciated. The other is that, you know, we as the TDHE and our staff, we really have to be the advocates and navigators through this whole process. For both the lender's perspective, we're fortunate that we have great relationships with our lenders and then our home buyers. And the thing that I emphasize is relationship building. It's so important to build that relationship. And just to end on that, Kimberly, I think for a while there, she'd come into me and she'd say, God, she said, so-and-so and them are getting a divorce, and they're both talking to me, and I don't know what to say to them, you know. But that's how close, you know, you get with your families, is they just like, my staff really gives them a lot more advice than just how to get through a mortgage loan process. It's just young, you know, just helping them with everything, and that's not a bad thing if you do it with a good heart in a good way. It's a good thing.
Yes, thank you. Now, Sharon, you kind of addressed the need for professional development and capacity building amongst yourself, and so I'm just curious for you all, what are some other things that you see as needs on the grassroots level that you have, either resources or additional support that would be really helpful for you all as you continue your work?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I want to lead off by saying advocacy does work, and so do partnerships. And Cheyenne River Housing Authority is a member of the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition. And our participation has really helped us develop multiple strategies to promote homeownership on Cheyenne River. They helped us fund a community needs assessment study on homeownership. that was really important work for us to do it. Instead of being helter-skelter and not showing, you know, where do we start, where do we go, it really helped us like focus in and really understand what the needs and priorities were of our membership. So certified staff, you know, certified staff allowed us to get hero funds, and enterprise grant allowed us to expand and hire another staff person. So now, and to have home buyer trainers that just, you know, more than one. Because before, if you have just one person doing it, you're really restricted, limited. Try to get as many of your staff certified so that you can cross-train and that you can have a lot of flexibility in your curriculum and in your training schedule. Construction interns, workforce development, you know, we were able to get interns coming through our program, and they become our workforce because as a developer, we have a force account crew, and so we do the foundation, site work, and all of that to make that more affordable house for the family. So we're always looking for construction workers. The other is partnerships, you know, with funders, lenders, public and private sector. So, I mean, that's all what works for us, and that's what we need.
Okay.
Right, and that's all through the coalition. A lot of that work has been done by Sharon leading the policy committee. The coalition is made up of, is it 5 working committees, I think? Physical issues, home buyer readiness, the veterans committee, policy, and sustainability, or something similar to that. What we're trying to do with the coalition is kind of address a broad range of the barriers that we identified from the very beginning. And so with that, you know, with the physical issues committee, they address first of all, the lack of housing stock on all of our reservations. There's not enough. It's not like you can go to your local realtor. There is no realtor, and find a list of homes available, because there are no homes available, period. You wouldn't be able to find any. And so what we did with the physical issues to address that is we went straight to the contractors and said, what would it take for you to build more homes? And so we had the first of 2 contractors roundtables. And lo and behold, I was surprised that that the contractors want to buy homes for individuals. They understand it's not going to be as much of a money-making deal as working on a big hospital or jail, but they would prefer to be building homes for Native families. Their biggest barrier in doing that was the lack of qualified workforce, which is really frustrating for me on Pine Ridge when there's 85% unemployment and they can't find qualified workforce. And so that's the program that Sharon was talking about. Is we're now in our 2nd year of the construction internship program, where we've received support from city and others for a 2nd year of us working with Oglala Lakota College to identify up to 33 students from Cheyenne River and from Pine Ridge and place them with working contractors, including the housing authorities. And so it's a win-win for everybody. The contractor who needed the help now has the help, which the coalition is paying for. It's a 10-week-long program. We pay $10 an hour. But the student obviously gains the experience they're not going to get otherwise. They get to count those hours towards 240 of those hours towards their college credit requirements. And obviously, at the end of the day, hopefully they're working on a home where a Native family will end up benefiting. So some of our interns working on Pine Ridge are actually working with the contractor who is working on the homes at Eagle Nest Housing. So that is working. It's just mutually beneficial. With that, though, the coalition, obviously, the biggest thing that they're doing is providing this. I don't know if it's the biggest, but one of the big things is this certification. It sounds small, but you know, for you to prepare yourself and to have a coalition who provides the training, you know, for you to become certified in the homebuyer education and post-purchase. But it's also at another level, one of the issues across rural America, not just in the state of South Dakota, in our reservation communities, is the lack of certified inspectors. the lack of appraisers, that level, and the coalition has taken it upon themselves to address that barrier as well. Over the course of the last 3 years, I think we've had 3 inspector certification trainings, or 4, 3, I've lost count. At any rate, we have a large number of people participating. It's a super hard test. I've sat through it. I'm gonna take it next time. It's a 4-day training, and to be honest now, I feel like it's a big success that we now have 5 certified inspectors. They're native inspectors, and they're serving our reservation communities in South Dakota. We're also diving in to address the appraisers. There's a lack of appraisers across the state of South Dakota, and specifically appraisers who are willing to do anything in Indian country. They don't know how to appraise trust land. And so we're working with SDSU, ICC, other local partners across the state to address that as well. So those are some of the broad range of things the coalition is doing, and it's just part of the success of the coalition is the very strong participation, the commitment we have from partners, you know, like Sharon and others who have a lot of experience working in this industry their whole lives, and now they get to contribute it all, share it all through the coalition. So
That's great, Tony. I do want to make sure that we do keep some time for questions. So does anybody have any questions as we were talking about the great work that these organizations are doing? If not, I got plenty more, but.
I was wondering if, you know, we provide homebuyer education on the White Earth Reservation. I'm wondering what you think is a successful percentage of those that receive education and ultimately become homeowners.
Before I give you, I'm going to tell you a story that was told to me by Donna Vandal, who worked with the Winnebago homebuyer educator, and she had her class. She had 15 people that went through her class, and she said, but registered for her class. And when she said when she finished, she only had 5 that finished it. And she said of those 5, she said 3 of them decided that they weren't ready to take this responsibility. So how would you deem success there? I think she had great success, that she took people through and they recognized at the end of that class, you know what, I'm not ready for this. And to me, that's success too. So the number of people that we have our summer class, which is the first time we've offered it. We weren't sure that people would want to take a class during the summer with all the competing interests and activities. But we said, well, we'll go ahead and do it. So we had 25 people that have signed up, and I apologize, 28 people that have signed up. We have 3 classes left, and we've got 25 that are still coming. So they will graduate 25 people. Now, out of that, how many are going to go on to homeownership? I think this class, I think we had probably 5 that were what you would call credit ready, and then the others either have no credit or need credit repair. But if Housing Authority does its job, and we provide good programs for the low-income families with good subsidies that can get them into a loan, or if we continue to provide home sites like Badger Park, our subdivision, to where we've got the infrastructure and everything there, and that they take in as equity into a loan, then I would say that we would be doing really great if we had about 75% that actually were able to get into home ownership, and that doesn't always mean new construction. You know, to us, home ownership is with our needs assessment, what we found is the first entry into home ownership is a used mobile home. And so to respond to that, we are developing a courtyard of a new site that provides that infrastructure for new and used manufactured homes. So success, I guess you have to look at it in a lot of different ways. I mean, I have to be open-minded to define success, because if I try to define it in one way, then I'll get discouraged.
But we're having success in so many other ways. You can't look at it as a percentage, honestly, or you would quit in a hurry. The truth is, if you have somebody, yes, it's a success if they complete the class, yay. Probably they might not be ready for home ownership, or there might not be a home available yet. Chances are you've planted the seed, though, and you've planted the seed, and it might not just be for that individual, it's probably for the entire family. Because we're so much about not just the individual, the whole family is probably participating. The other thing is, did they open up a savings account along the way for the first time ever? You know, did they clean up some credit with a consumer loan through a credit union? You know, will they take another class? Will they go on and maybe think about a college education now with that savings account? I don't know, but you never know what seed you're planting. So that's the success.
So there's another success as well. One of the tribes I work with had a tremendous demand for home ownership. A lot of people had, I think the first class, there was not one qualified person credit-wise in the class. So they thought, well, let's do a lease to own. So they had a program where you rent for 24 months, and then you had to have a mortgage, and if you weren't mortgage ready, then you got out of the house. Well, that didn't work out. Hardly anybody made that barrier because they were naive. Their second was more like the mutual help model. It was a lease to own, a formal, where you build equity, and over time, if you paid your rent, took care of your unit. That had a little better success, but you know the program that's succeeded now there for that particular tribe? It's a flat rent to own. You qualify, you go in and they qualify them on income. They agree to pay a certain rent. If they pay that rent and stay in compliance with their lease for 20 years, they get the deed. If any time they move out, then it's all been considered rent. And they're having tremendous success with that. So, I mean, there isn't one model that works for everybody in a traditional sense. So.
Great. Other questions? Jackie?
I have a question, and just feeling what you just said.
Can I get the mic, Jackie, from Harlem?
Yeah, sorry. I had two in front of me. So given what you just said and yesterday's conversation, a little bit about how do we change this, make this paradigm shift about really what is affordable and then also paying for, not having a skewed, earlier in the conversation today, you talked about the rent versus admin. And I guess I'm just wondering, in those models where we have, like, how do we make decisions about the level of subsidies versus, and to be able to make a unit home ownership affordable and still make it reality-based so that we are creating an environment for the future that is sustainable. And maybe if you could share any examples you may have had with talking with tribal leaders about that.
In this particular case, Jackie, that this tribe, created this rent to own. The payment's $400 a month, and the reason it's $400 a month is they had over 500 mutual help units built during the mutual help era, and a lot of those units had been abandoned, and so they were around the reservation, but they had infrastructure. Some of them, the house was still good, but it just had broken windows, or and some they had to tear down. So they went in with a Title VI loan to rehab those, and their debt service is covered plus $100 a month to help with the insurance and whatnot out of that $400 rent. Now, if they were building brand new houses, they probably couldn't do that program. So they're trying it, and they're getting people to understand you want a little better house. And the other thing that made it work, they had a policy that if that even though they didn't have to, if they went over 100% of median while they were in a low rent unit, they had 1 year or pay market rent. So that's what allowed them to move them into this program. And it's been very good there. They've got a 95% collection rate 3 years into this program. So.
And I think when I say that housing has changed and how you develop housing, your pro forma, no matter if you're doing a rehab project or whatever, that tells you whether that program is going to be sustainable or if it's feasible for you. So, you know, we need to get in the habit of doing pro forma on every project that we have, because that identifies your operating costs, it identifies if you've got debt service. I mean, that there is an indicator.
Okay, I'm getting the look here. So with that, I want to thank our wonderful panelists. Thank you very much.